Boy, some of you came back. Jeez. I wouldn't have if I didn't have to. I'm Bob Darrell. I'm an alcoholic. Some of you must have been really bad drunks to have to listen to me twice in one day. It's like some kind of cosmic penance that's over the top, I'll tell you. I asked to talk about something that probably more than anything in AA saved my life, and that's 12-step work. In the very beginning of working with others, it makes a statement. It says, practical experience shows that nothing will so much ensure immunity from drinking as intensive work with other alcoholics. It works where other activities fail. I would have never survived my first couple years of sobriety if it wasn't for intensive work with other alcoholics. I didn't work the steps right off the bat the way it suggests in the book. If you go through the timeline in working with others, how to work with a guy, I didn't do that. I was about 4 years sober before I did my first real 4-step out of the big book, the first Alcoholics Anonymous 4-step. I did a couple prior to that, but they weren't the same thing, and really nothing that changed, really. And I survived my first 4 years of sobriety by a lot of service and a lot of 12-step work. I am the depressive type of alcoholic by nature. And what that means is that when I stop drinking, I have bouts of anxiety and worry, neurotic worry, and it eventually turns into depression. And I've been misdiagnosed by psychiatrists on a couple occasions. It looks, when I'm into the real worry thing and I'm getting a little manic about it, it looks like free-floating anxiety almost to the point of a panic disorder, but it's not really. It's just, I am the guy that when I'm running the universe and everything's my responsibility, I just overloaded with everything. Me being the center of my life without the benefit of anesthetic is like going into your kitchen, getting the blender that's designed for 110 volts, taking it into the laundry and plugging it into the 220. It's just too big. It's too much. I overload. And as most newcomers do, and I was, not too long ago, years ago, I was talking to some new person at a meeting who hadn't worked the steps yet, hadn't surrendered, hadn't really done anything except was kind of trying to work on themselves, and that's a bad thing to do. And I said, "How's it going?" And she went, "It's too big." Oh, I knew exactly what she meant. It's too big. And what would happen to me is that after a while, it just gets on me. And when I was diagnosed as clinically depressed, I'm sure that, and this was a good psychiatrist, and I'm sure that it looked like that to him. But it wasn't really clinical depression. I know that beyond a shadow of a doubt for a couple reasons. One is that I was given a diligent treatment for clinical depression. It didn't work. It wasn't until I applied the treatment for spiritual depression that I started to get free. And what I was experiencing was the depression of the obsessively, overly self-involved. What happens to me is without realizing it, I just get so focused on my feelings and my future and how bleak and it could be and all the anxiety I have about it. I get so burdened and smothered by the remorse and the shame and the guilt from my past. And I just get myself and my past and my future and my life just kind of on me. Like that creature in Alien that attaches itself to your face, right? It's just there. And it feels like the air has been, like I can't breathe. Like my spirit can't breathe. And what happens eventually is I return to drinking. And eventually I returned to drinking because it's not... When people, I never got this. When people in AA would say, if you don't treat this disease, the obsession to drink will return. Well, it didn't always come back in an obsession with like Jack Daniels or rum. What it came back in is in the form of an obsession for freedom. Is that I just wanted to bust out. And and the only thing that I ever knew that busted me out of me just like that was once upon a time, 5 shots of Jack Daniels, I get free. I get free. And that's how the obsession to drink would return. So I survived my first 4 years of sobriety, and to this day I survived myself a lot by doing 12-step work. And in Bill's story, he talks about an experience that's exactly what I had on a repeated basis. He talks about he would be overcome with waves of depression and self-pity because his life was still a shambles and it really wasn't doing very good, and he couldn't get back on his feet financially, and he'd sink into these deep depressions. And in desperation, not knowing what else to do, he'd go to Towns Hospital and he'd find some alcoholic that was going through delirium tremors or was kicking alcohol with addiction, and he'd be a mess, and he'd spend a couple hours with that guy, and he said in his story, and he would leave the hospital miraculously uplifted. You see, when I do that, what happens is that my self-obsessed, self-involved focus on me that is actually smothering and depressing my spirit gets shifted onto this guy who's suffering and having a tough time. And the minute the shift starts, it's I get up off of me and onto you, and I get free. And when you think about it objectively, isn't that what alcohol really did? I mean, remember, the feeling. I didn't connect the dots until I was sober a long time. But alcohol, not at the end of my drinking. The last couple of years it was bleak, it had turned on me. But in the good years, in the years where the hook was set, the fun years, the magic years of drinking, what alcohol did essentially was relieve me of the bondage of self. I could walk into a bar just with me on me, and so overwhelmed and lonely and depressed and frustrated and full of guilt and stuff, worry and just bad, and have 5 or 6 drinks, and I would be relieved of the bondage of self as I got off of myself and got free. And that's what Alcoholics Anonymous is designed to do. In the 12-step work I did in early sobriety, bought me islands in my self-obsessed, self-centered life of freedom from me as I would get wrapped up in you and helping you. And it happened at a lot of levels. I'd get that to some degree in setting up the chairs in a meeting. I'd get a little, somebody'd pat me on the back, and I'd feel, a little good that I did something for somebody else. I did something for AA. But I got it the strongest in 12-step work. I was one who was pushed. My first sponsor had not very great knowledge of the big book or the steps, but he was big on service. He was a past delegate. He was conference chairman. He did a lot of 12-step work. He was one of the first guys in Las Vegas to do H&I work, and him and a bunch of guys brought meetings into the detox I was in, and he was big on that. And so I'm newly sober, and they're pushing me into doing this. They're pushing me, a guy with a lot of problems, into going and helping others, which didn't make any sense to me at all. I didn't feel really ready yet. I told him, I said, I'm not really ready yet. I don't really feel like I have anything to give away just yet. And he said to me, and thank God the old-timers don't really give a lot of credence to your opinion of what you need. And he didn't really. And he just said to me, he said, listen, kid, if you wait until you feel ready to help somebody before you help somebody, you'll have already died of alcoholism. Just go do it. And I just started doing. I started going to 2 hospital and institution meetings a week. I've done that nonstop for over 29 years. It's been the bread and butter. It's been the meat and potatoes of my recovery. And I've had the exact same experience that Bill Wilson talks about. I've had problems in business. I started a couple meetings at the detox midday, from 12:30 to 2, and I can't tell you how many days before I sold my business, I'd be having a bad morning. It's not really bad. It's just I've never really had a bad day sober. I've had some that really appeared to be bad, though. And I'd have one of those ones that appears to be bad, and it's basically it's either people are not doing things my way, or I suspect they're about to get out of line and not do things my way. That one of those kind of things. And so I'd be ratcheted up with anxiety, just full of self-centered fear and crazy. And I'd go to the detox, and just like Bill Wilson, I'd come out of there like, what was I worried about? Doesn't mean I'd see some guy in there that's dying of alcoholism, so full of remorse and self-loathing, with just a feeling of hopelessness. He can't imagine that he's ever going to get out of this trap because he's been a relapser for 6 or 7 years. He's given up all hope. And what I see is myself. And in contrast, I see that the hand of God is obviously in my life, because here I am going back to a company I own. And I was that homeless guy not too long ago. And I am reaffirmed and reminded of the basic truth that why would I worry? I am taken care of here. And know that he could be too, if he could just clear away enough of himself that is between him and God, so he could start to make that little bit of connection that I've made here. I never read this chapter in the book, Working with Others, chapter 7, the first few years, and as a result of that, I don't know, I may have done more harm than good. I think alcoholics are either going to carry the message or carry the disease. I think I carried the disease more than I carried the message, but it freed me because I'd be thinking about somebody else. But I didn't know what I was doing. There's a part in here on page 90 where it cautions us that if a guy does not want to stop drinking, don't waste time trying to persuade him. Well, if you're the egomaniac with the inferiority complex like I am, and you get sober, and old-timers are pushing you to do 12-step work, what do you bring into the table except not a very good feeling about yourself and this big ego that wants to be showy and impress people? So the 12-step work becomes all about me. I get a guy through the central office, or I pick a guy up coming out of Samaritan House or out of detox or whatever, and I got him in my car, or I get him in the middle of the night because he called central office and he ran out of vodka basically and was lonely, and I put on my cape, and you can almost hear the theme song to Mighty Mouse playing in the background. Here I come to save the day, that kind of thing. And I rush out there because I want to look good to the old timers, right? And I get one of these poor sots, and he's gonna stay sober if I have to kill him, right? And I'm dragging him around. I'm pushing him with this abstinence. Don't drink no matter what. And you can't transmit something you haven't got. So I don't have the steps. I just have you don't drink. You go to a lot of meetings and you help other people just like you, and you pray, and that's all I got. I'm giving away what I got. That's it. That's all I got. And some of these guys don't want to be sober. They called AA for the exact same reason that I'd called AA, that I'd called suicide prevention, that I'd called a lot of places. It's 3 o'clock in the morning. I'm out of vodka. I'm lonely. I've already called every ex-girlfriend. So who do you call? You call AA. Now, they don't really want to get sober. They just are lonely and out of vodka. So I get this poor guy, and I'm going to make him stay sober no matter what. And I'll tell you, I think I did more harm than good, because the book goes on to say that we should leave, that these guys aren't ready. Leave them alone. Because if you don't, you may spoil a future opportunity. Because maybe the guy hasn't hit a bottom yet, but maybe in 6 months or a year he will. Now the problem is, if he does, he's got a bad taste in his mouth, because I've hammered him with all this self-righteous, evangelistic kind of crusader stuff in AA. And I suspect, and I hope it's not true, but I may have done more damage than good. Because not out of malice, but out of ignorance, because I'd never read this book. All I'm bringing to the table is ego, no principles. And when it said, we talk in AA in the tradition, 12th tradition, about principles before personalities. When I started to approach 12-step work from the information, it's a process. They talk about an interviewing process. They talk about just you do this and then you do this and don't ever do that. And when I started doing what it says in this chapter, all of a sudden things started to change. My whole experience with 12-step work, because by coming from the principles, I was pushing the ego aside and just doing the right thing, just following the procedure. And there's an old adage about trying to get a guy to change or get sober that's not ready to get sober. It says it's like trying to teach a pig to sing. Not only doesn't it work, it annoys the pig. And I annoyed a lot of pigs in early sobriety, man, I'm telling you. And that's just the way it was. It was not out of malice. The book goes on to talk about this interviewing process. And it gets to a point where you have to ascertain, first of all, that he's an alcoholic. And then it says, if you are satisfied that he's a real alcoholic, and then later on it talks about you got to be satisfied that he knows he is too. But if you're satisfied, then you introduce him to the program of recovery. And one of the mistakes I made, and I think sometimes that I think one of the greatest things I can ever share in Alcoholics Anonymous is the experience of the things I've done wrong. I think that sometimes has more value than the things I've done right. And I didn't do that for a long time, and so consequently, I would end up sponsoring people that aren't even alcoholic. And it's ego. It's like I'm trying to put notches in my big book or something, it's right. And the reason that singleness of purpose is so important is that it's a bad deal to be a guy out there bringing people into Alcoholics Anonymous that aren't alcoholic. And I got a guy years ago, and he was a good guy, and he was at Detox, and I shared at the meeting, and he came up to me and he stroked my ego, was what he did, and he told me, he said, I'd never heard anything like that, I really identify with you, and would you sponsor me? And because he really liked what I shared and he wanted me to sponsor him, his intelligent quota just went up about 5 notches right before my eyes, this guy's brilliant, that kind of, Anyway, I start to talk to him about alcoholism, and he doesn't have a problem drinking. His problem is cocaine. And so I did the one thing that Bill Wilson tells us absolutely not to do as old-timers in AA, and that's to try to make a non-alcoholic into an alcoholic. And my ego's involved, and my ego, because he likes me and he wants me to sponsor him, I want to believe he's something he's not. So I started talking to him. I said, but if you did drink, you'd probably be alcoholic, wouldn't you? And he went, I don't know. He said, I know I got a bad problem with cocaine. I said, but if you drank, you'd probably have some kind of craving. Maybe you'd go and get drunk and do cocaine if you drank, right? He goes, I don't know. I don't know. So I'm trying to make him into being an alcoholic when he's not. And he was very active. I sponsored him. He was very active in Alcoholics Anonymous for several years, 3-4 years, I suppose. Sponsored 4 guys. And then all his sponsees got to observe something that was not good for them to observe. And 2 of them didn't survive it. They got to see their sponsor drink successfully. And I'm not saying this, it was not a show. He really was not alcoholic. As long as he didn't do crack cocaine, he was fine. And he went back to drinking, and he has drank successfully for, I think it's been a decade, or it's been probably close to a decade. I was at his wedding where him and his bride, who's not in any kind of program, just a normal gal, were given a bottle of Dom Perignon champagne, a small bottle of it, and between both of them, they drank less than half of it on their wedding night and let the rest of it go flat. Now, that's not alcohol. With a $120 bottle of champagne, you doesn't matter what your point you're trying to prove. You're an alcoholic. You ain't gonna do that. I mean, he's not alcoholic, and he's drank successfully all these years, and his sponsees got to see that, and I brought him into AA because I wouldn't follow the directions, right? And I think there's a lot of that exists in AA. And it's not out of malice. I loved the guy. Besides the fact that he stroked my ego, I really liked and cared about the guy. But what I should have done is I should have channeled him to an appropriate 12-step program for people with his problem, where he would probably exist today helping other people with his problem. He has no 12-step program now. He's sober, except for as a beer occasionally, but he's fine with that. And he doesn't do crack cocaine, and he'll be fine as long as he doesn't do crack cocaine. He did not suffer from alcoholism. And I never ascertained that. And what I've learned to do over the years now is I sit down and I interview a guy, and we go through the doctor's opinion, and I want to find out if he has the phenomenon of craving. Do you have the allergic reaction to alcohol? It doesn't matter if you did a lot of drugs. It has nothing to do with it. Matter of fact, one of the worst things that treatment centers ever induced and brought into AA was this concept of drug of choice. I bet you there's thousands of people that have died behind that. Because if you have an allergy to alcohol, it's like having an allergy to strawberries. It doesn't matter that blueberries are your fruit of choice. If you have an allergy to strawberries, you have an allergy to strawberries. It doesn't matter if you did other drugs. It didn't matter if you choked little baby chickens' necks. It doesn't matter if you have alcoholism, you have alcoholism. And if you don't, all the drug use in the world doesn't change that either. If you don't have it, you don't have it. And that guy didn't have it. So I sit down with him, and what happens when you drink? Are you the guy that it talks about on page 44 when it says, if you find when you honestly want to, you can't quit entirely, or if when drinking you have little control over the amount you take? When 2 drinks, 3 drinks, when you start to get lit up, what happens to you? Are you overcome with a yearning and a craving for more of that feeling? We don't care if you ran out and bought drugs. Did you have the allergic reaction to alcohol? Do you have that thing that Silkworth says differentiates us and sets us apart as a distinct entity? Or are you the guy who has a drug problem and can have a couple drinks and it doesn't do anything for you? Because there's programs for that. Do you have alcoholism? Are you a real alcoholic? And then are you willing to go to any lengths? Or as it says in several places in the book, if you really believe that now that you know that, you can beat that, our hats are off to you. We wish you well. And if you can't, we're here. Because there's another aspect of powerlessness that I got to ascertain that the guy has. And it's not enough to know that you have the phenomenon of craving. Do you know that you're also the guy that when you honestly want to, you can't quit entirely? Or are you the person that just once you make up your mind that you're not going to drink, you're good to go? So I sit down with the guy and I try to ascertain those things, and I try to find out if he's willing to go to any lengths. Do you know that you're toast? And the funny thing about Alcoholics Anonymous is that we're not really into trying to get you to believe anything except the truth about yourself. That's all. Matter of fact, we don't even encourage you to. We're not even insisting you find God. All you got to do is find your own hopelessness. And once you get that there's no hope and there's no human power and there's nowhere to go, then you're going to find yourself at that point open to whatever, because there's nothing left. One of my favorite parts of the book is there is a solution. It says that we came to believe in the hopelessness and futility of life as we'd been living it. And that's before you ever believe Alcoholics Anonymous will work for you or that there's even a God. You come to believe in the hopelessness and futility. In other words, I'm standing on a bridge trying to take my own life because I am finally an alcoholic of the hopeless variety. I've lost all hope of fixing myself. I've been to every therapist I could go to. I've taken every medication I could do. I've been to church. I lost all hope of fixing myself, and I can't even get any relief in the bag and the bottle anymore. I drink, and it's pathetic. I lost all hope of jump-starting the party, of finding any ease and comfort in the bottle. My last couple of years of drinking were full of self-pity and depression, crying jags, and it's pathetic. I became an alcoholic of the hopeless variety. And oddly enough, it was not the hopelessness of not getting, I'm hopeless, I'll never get off the streets. I could care less. I was hopeless when I lost all hope of when I finally saw that the party's over, of ever getting back to the good old days, of ever getting that magic effect again. And I try to take that guy, try to go with that guy in that journey. And I use the doctor's opinion sometimes. And, I try to sponsor guys and work with guys with all three legacies, because I believe that every one of them is very important. I've seen guys in Alcoholics Anonymous that are so good with the big book and the steps they almost become step technicians, and they get real sick because there's no unity amongst them in the fellowship. There's no connectedness. There's no herd with them. And also, you can be real part of the herd, or you can be real part of the recovery process in the steps. And if you don't do service, your recovery becomes all about you. And so I try to sponsor people in all three legacies. And I try to I encourage them to get a working and personalized experience with the traditions. What do they mean to you personally? And also to become a part of, to have service commitments in groups and to be involved in the fellowship. And I encourage guys to go out to coffee with people. Go out, be a part of. There's a potluck, go to it. If there's guys going out to eat before or after a meeting, go, be a part of. And that's a hard thing. I think there's a natural resistance in all of us to doing those kind of things. And yet, those are the things that seem to be essential. I run into guys that have a resistance to anything to do with God, and I run into that a lot. And I don't try to get them to believe anything except the truth about themselves. There was a guy years ago, smart guy, he had a PhD in something that was meaningless, but it was brilliant guy. And and we're having this conversation, and I'm talking about my experience with connecting eventually and realizing that there was some sort of power working in my life, and how I eventually started to call it God because I didn't know a better word, and and how it became real for me. And he says to me, are you open-minded? I said, well, I try to be. I think so. I hope so. He said, are you willing to entertain the possibility that there really isn't a God? That maybe what has happened to you that you think is God is that you just have simply made up your mind that there was one, and it's really you that's doing all this. You've just changed it. You've just decided, you've pulled yourself up by your bootstraps, and it's really you that's done this, and that there really isn't a God. Maybe it's just your positive thinking from now on, or your different approach. And he kind of got me, and I thought for a minute. I said to him, I said, well, I said, I don't know. You could be right. I may get to the end of the race and find out that it really wasn't a God. My life turned around because I chose to believe certain things, and it was really me that did it. I don't know. Maybe I'll find that out, and there is no God. But I'll tell you something. If that's true, I will still hold on to the illusion that it's God. Because I would rather have that. Because after I drop you off at the halfway house, I'm going to go back to my house. And I'm going to change, and I'm going out to dinner at a very fine gourmet restaurant with some friends of mine that are in Alcoholics Anonymous, and I'll be going in a couple of weeks, going to Hawaii, and I'll probably sit over there on the beach and realize how maybe God didn't do all this, but I'm going to hold on to the idea that He did, rather than be right about what you think you're right about and go back to living in an abandoned building trying to get up enough courage to kill myself. I'll take the illusion. And what I try to do with guys is I just try to bring them back to reality. Just bring them what do you got to lose? What do you got to lose? There's one of the speakers he probably won't share this. I haven't heard him share it in a lot of years, but I was at a retreat, and we had him as one of the guys doing a retreat my home group put on. And I watched the lights of about 5 newcomers come on because he shared an experience with his sponsor that everybody in the room got. And his sponsor said to him, he said, well, we need to start working on these steps, so I need to ask you some questions. And he said, okay. And he said to Sandy, do you pray a lot? Have you spent a lot of time in prayer? And he went, no, I don't think I've ever done that. And, oh, okay. Do you read a lot of spiritual books? I went, no, I don't. Nope, no, I haven't done that. Oh, okay. Do you do a lot of meditation? He said, no, I haven't done it. I've never done that. I don't even know what that is. And he said, do you get in a lot of spiritual conversations with people? And he goes, no, I've never done that either. And the sponsor says, so how's it going? And I watched these guys in the room go, oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. How's it going? Yeah. And that's what I try to do with guys. I just try to bring them back to the truth about themselves. We talk a lot in Alcoholics Anonymous about spiritual awakenings. I think most of the time it's just pulling your head out of your butt and awakening to the truth. What's really going on? Not the story in your head about what's been going on, but what's really going on. And that's, I think, as a sponsor, that's part of my job in the beginning with a guy, is just to bring him to the truth about himself. And a lot of times as I use my experience. One of the most powerful magical things in AA is that we don't talk to other guys and try to tell them about themselves. Because alcoholics, for the most part, we're very defended people. By the time most of us get to AA, people have come and talked to us about ourselves, therapists and clergy. And I just have this ability to discount what you're saying, and you don't really understand me, and et cetera, et cetera. But in AA, we do something amazing, is that we don't try to tell you about you. I start telling you about me. And now you're just listening to me talk about myself. Your defense mechanisms are down. And what happens often is we start to connect, and you sit there. As I sat in the meetings in the detox in 1978 and listened to my first sponsor and members of AA talk about themselves, and I remember sitting there thinking to myself, oh my God, I'm like that. And I have found myself in you more than I could ever find myself in me. I don't know what it is about me. I can't sit by myself through self-examination and really get a clear view of me. But I can listen and observe you talking about and describing you and sit there and go, oh my God, that's me. And I've done that so much over the years, and I think that's one of the most powerful things I do for a new guy is I open myself up to them. There's a line in the book that I think is the cornerstone of everything we do in AA, and it talks about our approach. And it says that we must try to place ourselves in the position of the new guy and approach him the way we would like to be approached if the tables were turned. And when I started doing that and as part of this change in approach on 12-step work, when I started trying to follow what it talks about in working with others, there's an amazing phenomenon that occurs that can only occur between two alcoholics. And see, every single one of us in this room has an ability that may be blocked within you because you're too consumed with yourself. But if you can push yourself aside, you have an ability to go down within yourself and really get where this new guy's at. Because he is you on a different day. A psychiatrist can't do that because he's never been there. He does not have the wiring within inside himself to get in touch with to really get this guy. And consequently, when I can do that, I can go to a place inside myself where I can get where this person's at. I mean, really get it. And then I can talk to him the way I would want someone to talk to me. And what do we do essentially? I'm talking to the me that is in him. And a connection is made. A connection of the Spirit. And if you've done a lot of 12-step work, you've had those experiences. You don't do it every time, but every once in a while you make that connection. And it's an amazing thing. And when you've made it, and you're going home that night, in your car, oh my God. Life is never as good as that. There's never a rightness about yourself and about life like there is when you're fulfilling your divinely crafted primary purpose. A purpose that all your pain, all your misery, all your failure has brought you to. Where it all becomes useful and it all makes sense. I used to wonder why, when I was new in the years I was in and out, why these old-timers in AA, not all of them, some of them are mopes, but there's quite a few of them that really are lit up. And they seem to have a confidence that it's not self-confidence, but it seems even better. And it's as if they know exactly who they are and they know exactly what their life's about. There's no aimlessness in them. There's no wondering what they're going to be when they grow up. There's no confusion about who they are. There's just an integrity and a oneness. They know exactly who they are, and they know exactly why they're alive. I know exactly who I am. I'm an alcoholic with a terminal illness called alcoholism, and I know exactly what my life's about. I am divinely crafted to help people exactly like me. Not everybody. Some people in AA don't relate to me at all. But that's okay. There'll be a speaker later on that you'll get, and we got a wrench for every nut. I mean, you're covered here. This is an all-inclusive program. But I am amazingly useful for people that are sick like I am sick. And in that purpose, primary purpose, all of a sudden, the worst stuff about me, drunk and sober, and I didn't get sober and stop screwing up, and all of it becomes useful. It all becomes useful to get another guy to start coming to the table here with AA, so he knows he's not alone. There's some warnings in here about things to do and things not to do. The timeline in here is very amazing in the light of the way AA has changed over the years. On page 96, it talks about you making your second visit to a man. Now, that could mean he might only be sober. He might not be done shaken yet. He might be like 2 days sober, right? Second visit to a guy. It says, suppose you're now making your second visit to a man. He has read this volume. Well, that would make him stand out amongst most newcomers. Oh, he has he? And says he's prepared to go through with the 12 steps. Where are they getting these guys? Wow! Whoa! I want 10 of them. I get the guys you got to twist their arm and But it says prepared. It doesn't say you have to be enthusiastic about it. And then, which is okay. Most of the new guys that I get and that are ready, that are ready to go ahead with the steps, they do it. They don't want to do it. Matter of fact, they just do it because they're lost. They have nowhere else to go, and I'm their sponsor, and they want to. They're worried. They think I'm going to be mad at them if they don't, or I don't know. They get all kinds of crazy self-involved reasons why they do it. And universally across the board, I have never yet met an alcoholic who comes to AA suffering from alcoholism, newly sober, in the middle of that despair and remorse and depression, all that stuff. I've never met one that looked at the steps and went, oh, yeah, that'll work. Oh, yeah. I've never met anybody that had that experience. As a matter of fact, what I experience is, guys, it's not until after you do the steps that you realize they work. And then everybody says the same thing. Oh, I should have done that a long time ago. So if you can just get a guy who's, I like the way they say prepared to go through with it. Like you can picture a guy walking the walk down death row. Prepared to go through with the 12 steps. We'll take that. And how do you get a guy like that? He doesn't have to believe in AA, because he doesn't. He just has to believe that he's toast. He just has to get the truth about himself. We in step 3, we talk about a decision. And this decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God is formed from a lack of alternatives. The word decision comes from a Latin word scissere, means to cut away. If you've been brought to the truth about yourself, then the ABCs are true. Then you are alcoholic. You're screwed. You're in a trap you can't spring. You're in a terminal illness. You're gonna burn your life to the ground until it kills you. You can't stop the cycle. And you can't manage your own life, and it's not from a lack of trying. Look at all the things you've done to try to make you better, and here you are. And no human power, and let's talk about the human powers you've tried. Oh, you tried her? Tried the medication, did you? Oh, you went to that therapist, and that one. Oh, and you were hypnotized. You did coffee enemas, did you? Oh, okay. All right. You tried every human power, and here you are. Here you are. God could and would if he were sought. Well, you don't know. If you're new, you don't know. How do you know? But if you get the A and B's true, well, what do you got to lose? Janis Joplin sang a song, Bobby McGee, and in the song she said, freedom's just another word for nothing left to lose. If A and B is true, if step 1 and 2 is true, and you get that, and you're convinced of that, you've just cut away all the alternatives. It's either this Alcoholics Anonymous is going to introduce you to a power that you could not connect with in church. You tried. You got saved, did you? And you drank again? Did you? Read the Bible every day like Dr. Bob and still drank again, did you? Then there's either a process to this and a path to the power that you couldn't connect with, or you're screwed. You don't have anything to lose at this point. You have nothing to lose. And that's where I try to take these guys. I just try to take them to the truth about themselves. That's all. In the early days when my ego was involved, I did a lot of stuff. It says don't do. It says do not put your relationship with the new man on a service plane, and if he clamors for this or that, or job or no job, or wife or no wife, and if he's constantly wanting you to fix his problems, the book implies he may not be ready. And I tried to fix a lot of guys' problems, and not out of ignorance. It was out of ignorance, but not out of malice. It was out of ignorance, not malice. And I cared about these guys to some degree. I could see little glimpses of myself in them, and there were times I really, really wanted them to be better, but I don't know what I'm doing. And there was one guy. I was working with him. He asked me to sponsor him, and he had warrants out for his arrest in another state. And it was really what brought it was, and it just he couldn't stop worrying about him. And I think it was what really brought him into AA. He was so scared, and he keeps whining about these warrants, and I can't get him to do anything. The only way I can get him to a meeting is I got to go pick him up and take him to the meeting. And there was a federal judge in Las Vegas I didn't realize he was such a powerful man. He was, and he was in AA, and he's passed about 15 years ago, I guess he passed. He was a great guy, and he was real friendly to me, and we just hit it off. We went to this noon meeting together every day, and I went to this guy Roger, and I told Roger about this guy I'm sponsoring, but I lied to Roger. Really, I did. And I said to Roger, yeah, I'm working with so-and-so, and he really wants to be sober. And that's not true. Here's the truth. I'm working with so-and-so, and I really want him to be sober. That's the truth. And I lied to him again, and I said, and he's really doing AA. Well, he was doing nothing. All he would do is whine about stuff. And the truth was, I really wanted him to do AA. And then I told Roger, I said, he's got these warrants out for his arrest, and I think it's really blocking him from getting this thing. And is there anything you could do to help? And I gave him the guy's name and social security number, and Roger made some phone calls, and this because he had a lot of influence. Federal judge, his thing disappeared, and he was drunk a week later, and never came back. I have never. Now my big prayer for him is that he got sober in another town, maybe, and he's sober, and since then. But I haven't heard of that. I suspect he may have drank himself to death. I might as well have put a pistol to his head. When I tried to fix his problem, what I had fixed is I fixed the thing that brought him to AA, and once it was fixed, he had no more reason to stay here. I should have just put a bullet to his head. I think it would have been kinder than doomed him to years of more suffering from alcoholism. And I didn't do that out of malice. I did it out of ignorance. There's an old adage, you teach a guy to fish. You give a guy a fish, he'll fish for a day. You teach him how to fish, he'll fish for a lifetime. Well, that before I ever studied this chapter, I'm giving guys fish. The old timers never gave me fish. They gave me fishing lessons. I wanted fish. And they ain't giving me no fish. They're giving me fishing lessons. There's an old adage it's an old parable from South America of this farmer who grew up infatuated with these butterflies that you'll see in the rainforest. They have big, luminescent, opalescent-like blue wings that kind of change color. They're really pretty. I have one on my wall at home. They're beautiful. And he was so infatuated by these butterflies that he, one day at the end of his property, he found one of their cocoons in a tree, and he went down there to sit and watch this butterfly eventually emerge from the cocoon. And he sat there with a lot of enthusiasm, a lot of love and excitement for this butterfly he would finally see emerge and be birthed. And after a while, he saw the butterfly struggling in the cocoon, and he became afraid that maybe this time the butterfly didn't have what it takes to break out, or this time the cocoon's too thick. So he took a little knife and he made a tiny little slit in the side of the cocoon, and the butterfly was able to wiggle out through the slit, and it fell to the ground, and its wings were pale and underformed, and it laid there to die because it hadn't struggled enough. and I'm going around slitting guys' cocoons. And I am playing God, and I don't know it. And it is not out of malice. I think that sometimes the principles of Alcoholics Anonymous not only protect me from myself, but they protect me and others from my good intentions. Because I always have good intentions. But Alcoholics Anonymous does not ask me to live by good motives or good intentions. It asks me to live by principles. And there's a big difference. One of the things that was hard for me to get right away was that if you do the right thing for the wrong reasons, you're still doing the right thing. And if you're doing the wrong thing for the right reasons, no matter how justified they seem, you're still doing the wrong thing. And I had a lot of justifications. And you guys in Alcoholics Anonymous and the book has taught me how to set those aside and start coming from a place of principles, not a place of intentions or motives. I did a lot of that crazy stuff. I remember getting guys jobs. I'd go to somebody in AA that had a business, and I'd say, "Hey, so-and-so's doing really good, needs a job. Can you help him out?" And just because they liked me, they'd go, "Oh, I'll give him a job." And then the guy would drink and rob the guy, And oh man, there's another fish flushed down the toilet. I should have given him a fishing lesson. I remember I talk about a couple things. Something happens when two of us show up for the purpose of recovery. There's a power that exists in the midst. If you've sponsored guys or gals and you've done 12-step work, I know you've had this experience where you'll be caring about how a person's doing, and you will find yourself saying things to them that you don't know. Like it comes from somewhere. It comes through you. I think that is God. I think that if I could duplicate that in every area of my life, I would be 5 levels above the human race. But it only occurs when I'm out of myself. You can't use that for self-serving. It's not a self-serving power. But it is a power the same. And it's always right on the money. It's right. It's just perfect. And sometimes when I'm trying to help somebody and that happens, there's a feeling that comes to me it's hard to put into words, but it feels like I was used and part of something that loves very much. It's a connectedness that I feel at those times when I'm working with a guy. And it's an amazing thing. When it says in the 12 by 12 that this is the joy of living step, they're not kidding. It is the thing that lights me up. It's the thing that I've never had a feeling like that. I really encourage people to if you're not sponsoring guys, you're not doing 12-step work, you may be reasonably comfortable and you may be very sober, but I think you're missing something that is just essential. God will work in the venue of you helping others in a way that He can't work anywhere else. I'll tell you a little story, and then maybe that'll be it. When I was 10 years sober, I went through a really bad divorce. And in a 2-day period, I found out that my wife and daughter had moved in with one of my sponsees who actually had been my confidant for my marriage problems at the end when we were going through counseling. And I discovered that they'd been sleeping with each other for the whole last year of my marriage. And it seemed like everybody in AA knew except me. And what saved my life through that, there was an eventuality that I would go back through the inventory and the resentment section and get free of it and see it completely different and then eventually make some amends. But in the meantime, what got me through that period until I could do the work was that I was entrenched in a lot of service and a lot of 12-step work. And it bought me islands in my day that in the midst of a lot of excruciating pain and resentment and just overwhelming stuff. And one day, it was my day to pick my daughter up and spend the day with my daughter. And I have never loved anyone like I love my daughter. I was there when she was born. I cut her umbilical cord. I gave her first bath. I mean, she took my heart and has never given it back. And I have to this day, a connection with her like it's unbelievable. Well, it's my day to see my daughter. And she's at the time, Kate is like 2 years old. She's a sweetheart. And I go over there to pick her up for the day where they're all living together. And I go up to the door, and as I'm walking up to the door of their apartment, I get this knot in my stomach that is eating me alive. But I want to see my daughter. And I go up and I knock on the door, and the happy couple answers the door with my daughter there. And I take my daughter, and we go off for the day, and we spend the whole day together, and we're doing some stuff. And one of the things we did is we went to a ranch that a friend of mine worked at that had ponies and goats and horses and all kinds of stuff and cows. And my daughter just loved that. She got to ride the ponies around the corral, and it was wonderful. She had a great time. And where there's next to the corral, there's a picnic bench. And we're sitting on the picnic bench after riding the ponies, and Kate, she's thirsty. Now, there's a soda machine down next to the barn across the yard. So I said, I'll be right back. And Kate's sitting there with a gal, a friend of mine that works there. And I go down to get her a soda. And I'm coming back across the yard towards the picnic table. And I hear the gal who works there say to my daughter, Kate, she says, Kate, here comes your daddy. And Kate looks up and looks at me, looks at the woman and says, that's not my daddy. Craig's my daddy. And it felt like somebody had took a knife and stuck it in me and twisted it. And I pushed those feelings down, and I went back and I gave her the soda and a hug, and we sat there the rest for a little while, and I eventually went and did something else. And I took her home that night, and we're walking. I got her by the hand, and we're walking up the path to the apartment. And I knock on the door, and the happy couple answers the door. She jumps into his arms. I say goodbye. I turn around. I walk back to my car. I get in my car. I drive about a block away. I pull over, and I come apart at the seams. And I'm sitting in my car, and I'm crying, and I'm talking to God. And I'm saying to God, I said, God, I love my daughter, but I can't do this. This hurts too much. I'm not big enough for this, God. And I don't know what to do. I don't want to stop seeing my daughter, but I can't do this. And I look at the clock, and I got to meet a new guy at this front of an AA club, and he's going to be waiting outside, and I got to pick him up to take him to this other place, and I don't want to go, except I told him I'd meet him there, and I got this responsibility. So I drive over there. He's pacing up and down in front of the deal, and he gets in the car, and we get in the car. We're driving away. We're not even a minute. He's not even in the minute of in the car, and he starts crying because the courts had again denied him to ever see his kids. It was like a postcard from God. Bob, you can see your daughter. There's only one person that's stopping you. And I thought to myself, I'll do this one more week. I'll do it one more week. And one more week. And my daughter just turned 20. And she's the light of my life. We just were in Europe together. And he is gone. And I am her dad. You don't get that stuff unless you're in that venue. If you're not in that arena, God can't bring that to you. And how many times do people like guys like me get helped by the people that I'm deluded to think I'm helping? Right? You put your number out to a lot of guys and you sponsor a lot of guys, and all of a sudden something happens and you're sinking into a deep depression. What happens? The phone rings. I got to tell you what she did now. and you get relieved of the bondage of self just a little bit. Page 100, and I'll end with this. Both you and the new man must walk day by day in the path of spiritual progress. I don't think spiritual progress exists without helping others. There's an old adage that over the gates to heaven it says, no one enters here alone. You want to get in the dance? Bring somebody to the dance. Both you and the new man must walk day by day in the path of spiritual progress. If you persist, remarkable things will happen. What remarkable things? The stuff we talk about at coffee. As we sit and talk about, remember so-and-so? Remember he was homeless? He just bought a house. Remarkable things. Remember so-and-so that could never see his kids? Did you see him at the meeting with his kids? Remember so-and-so that was so depressed that he'd never be out of that pit emotionally? Did you see the light in his eyes as he's with those guys he sponsors? Remarkable things. I think 12-step work in Alcoholics Anonymous is like getting a ringside seat for the greatest show on earth. The things we see and experience. Remarkable things will happen. When we look back, we realize that the things which came to us when we put ourselves in God's hands were better than anything we could have planned. Oh yeah. I couldn't have even asked for the things that are of great value to me because I didn't even know they were of value. You let God bring it to you, He'll bring to you better stuff than you could have wanted or gotten. Because you don't know. You don't know. Better than anything we could have planned. Follow the dictates of a higher power, and you will presently live in a new and wonderful world, no matter what your present circumstances. I think one of the worst things that happened out of treatment centers was this idea that you've got to be sober a year before you help anybody. I'm glad nobody told Bill Wilson that. I'm glad nobody told Dr. Bob that. If you're sitting here and you're newly sober and you're depressed and your life's crap, get involved. There's an old adage, you want to get goosed by the Spirit? Get up off your butt. Thank you.